You almost got us killed that one time, remember?
Now, we both know that was your fault.
Thank the 12 we're safe.
Mind your horns there, man-bull.
Ha! Mayhap when you mind your manners.
Though the crystal that bound Thancred is no more, I doubt we can say the same of La Habrea. And even if we could, we know that he is not alone. Confounded Ascians. Their god may be unknown to us, but their zeal is unquestionable. Suffice it to say, it would be folly to assume that they no longer pose a threat. Nevertheless, for now, we must savor what peace we have won, however ephemeral. Do you see, Grandfather? Our first step towards realizing the dream for which you gave your life.
Friends, the dread night of Imperial tyranny and Ascian machination is ended. A new day now begins in Eorzea.
True to their name, the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, along with our champion, have delivered us from darkness.
Let their shared victory serve to remind us of our shared history. And let their bravery in the face of adversity inspire future generations.
Doubt not, the realm will need bravery in the days to come. Old rifts threaten to divide us within our walls, while hordes of beastmen claw at our gates. And though the Black Wolf be slain, the rest of the pack remains. Yet no foe need we fear, so long as we stand as one.
So long as the Scions stand for peace.
So long as our champion stands fast. For there exists no adversity over which we may not jointly prevail.
No longer can we turn a blind eye to the suffering of our allies.
No nation stands alone. If one should fall, so shall we all. Eorzea is our shared home. For any one of us to know peace, so too must our neighbor.
Just as we join in solidarity before you this day, so too shall our grand companies be joined henceforth to strive not only for the good of mere nations, but for the good of all the realm.
Change will not come overnight. Yet I foresee a day, not so very far from now, when the lines that divide our lands fade, and all of Eorzea is one.
It has been but 5 short years since the Battle of Cartano. 5 years since the advent of the 7th Umbral Era. No victory, however sweet, can wash away our bitter sorrows. No triumph can reclaim those we lost. Yet do not presume you honor them by dwelling on the past. It was not the past they fought for. You would repay their sacrifice by looking to the future.
A future united, as the warriors of light united in the champion.
Now is the time for us to rise as one, bearing all of Eorzea on our shoulders.
5 years ago, Eorzea bore witness to the end of the 6th Astral Era. Now, the 7th Umbral Era draws to a close, yet we come together not to glory in its end, but to mark a new beginning.
Let it be writ that on this day, by the light of the crystal, Eorzea ushered in a new era. The 7th Astral Era is come! And thus is ours a Realm Reborn!
What is it?
What was that?
That roar. It can't be.
Did you hear that?
There's no time to spare.
Where is it coming from?
Dread tidings, chaos and carnage! It is an abomination! A primal has awakened!
Bahamul, move.
Bahamut stirs.
One Azaz moves da.
As will the others ere long.
Fanza lok pai ki hads Aldorn Zul, Ukdorn.
'Tis not a question of whether Eorzea's champion shall yield, but of when.
We next starve Chemuv, the only cause that pose Ryboflavin.
And with each passing moment, we draw closer to the reckoning. To the one true God. Zodiac. And thus did dawn break on a realm reborn. But where there is light, there is always shadow. So I kind of want to talk about the ending there a little bit, because obviously there was a lot to take in and I didn't want to talk over it. First off, I thought the part when I first played this the very first time, the part where you run through the tunnel and there's like the explosion behind you and stuff and you jump out at the last second, that reminded me so much of Metal Gear Solid 2. I don't know if you guys ever played that, but Metal Gear Solid 2, that was like it, down to a T. It was so reminiscent. Interestingly, rewatching this now, because it has been years since I've really done the story in all its depth, I skip a lot of it when I do it. Even when I redo it now, like I would skip a lot of it, and now I just buy the boost usually if I make a character, which I haven't made one in a while, but other than Soapy here. I forgot how like that actually does a good job of being like kind of like emotional. Like you get excited, you get a little teary-eyed. Like it's not over the top anything. Like I wasn't like super excited and I wasn't crying, but I definitely felt some strings to my heart being pulled, you know, a little bit. So they did a good job of that. Final Fantasy XIV was in a very odd spot when it came out, and so they had to write the ending very carefully. And so what they did was they wrote an ending that was a lot of closure. I would kind of equate it to writing the first part of a trilogy of movies, right? Like you want to write it so like kind of like Star Wars did, where it had the end scene and you had the Death Star blows up. There's a lot of questions about like who survived and who didn't. The heroes get their medals. You know, same kind of thing here. Like, you know, we blow up the castrum and Thancred and I survive, and everybody else is kind of like no real, you know, you don't know what happened to Nero or Gaius, and you know, they have this whole like we've ushered in an umbral age and all this stuff, and so there was like a lot of good closure, right? And the reason they did that, and you have to remember, A Realm Reborn was the relaunch of a MMO that failed miserably. Final Fantasy XI did so good, Final Fantasy XIV did terrible. The 1.0 version of this game was horrendous. So bad, and I should actually probably go into discussion about why it was so bad at some point, which I will do later. But it was very bad. So when they shut it all down, when they made that storyline where they were going to have the calamity and they destroyed the world and remade it, and they shut it all down and they took it down, it was down for months, and then the game comes back up, they had to write the whole storyline, including the ending. And at that time, there was no indication of this game surviving, because it only got remade because Square Enix is Square Enix and they have a lot of money and power, and they were like, we'll give it one more shot, like we can do this, because they didn't want it to fail for a lot of different reasons. MMOs were really big at the time, they still pretty much are, but they were really big at that time, and there was money to be made, and they had enough name recognition and a big enough fan base, and as they were rebuilding the game, the fan base responded with, you know what, we'll give you another shot. Like they were going to give them a shot. But if the game came out and it was bad, it was dead. There was no third chance. There was not going to be another try. So they had to write the ending for this with closure, because if they even tried to leave a cliffhanger of any real sort, then it would just make people more upset. So it had to be, A Realm Reborn had to end with the closure, and so it did. Then I cut the credits roll, but after the credits, then they had the bit where Bahamut roars and stuff, right? And you might think that's not closure, but what that actually was them saying, we have in-game content in the game. the first binding coils of Bahamut were already in the game. So when you finished ARR, you still had things to do. There was Andappador Keep and the tombstones to collect and get armor, and then you would go to do your first raid. You would kind of equate it to like Molten Core in World of Warcraft. So there was a raid, it was there, you had to earn some gear and then go in and do it, but it was there. It wasn't complete, but the first part was there. So that was really what that was them saying, hey, we still have stuff. So it wasn't necessarily like a cliffhanger. It was just a saying like, awesome, you beat the game, but there's still more to do. Then the second part with the Shadow of Darkness teeters towards it being a cliffhanger without it actually being a cliffhanger. There was no cliffhanger to that. It was just them showing that, hey, there's a lot of Ascians and even La Habrea is still alive. So there's still danger in this world, with no actual hint to what would be coming later. There was nothing in there that suggested what you're going to go to the future and stuff, right? Now, looking back at it, with knowledge that we have, there were some hints. The fact that they had that meeting at the spot that they did, where you could clearly see the Keeper of the Lake, which was that dead dragon wound around the airship, right, inside the lake. Like, that actually is a hint to where they wanted to go in the next storyline, but it wasn't a real, like, it was so subtle no one knew. Like, you had no idea. So I thought it was really interesting. In the future, they don't do that. Like, after this, when the expansions come out, when they get to the ending, there is always the cliffhanger for the next chapter of the story, because obviously now we know Final Fantasy is going to be okay. Like, it's going to survive. So, and then here you come in after your cutscene. These are the 3 different merchants that you would meet at the very, 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 very beginning of the game, depending on which city you were in. And then you have the father from the Camp Drybone, where the church was, and then Sid, and Biggs and Wedge, and some guy named Arenvald, which I don't remember him at all, really. I would have thought Gamalt would be here, maybe. And here's the Scions. Hello, Scions. They applaud you as you walk in. Alpino and Minfilia. The Archons have conducted a preliminary investigation into the origins of the roar that rang out during the celebration. Their findings strongly suggest that a new primal has appeared. The roar generated a distinctive wave pattern in the aether, a pattern observed only once before in history, 5 years ago to be precise. I should like to think it mere coincidence, yet we cannot discuss that possibility. Well, I trust I need to say no more. At great sacrifice, we have delivered Eorzea from the threat possessed by the Empire and the Primals, and thereby secured peace. We cannot well allow the realm to be plunged into chaos once more. You have given your all for the cause, risking life and limb on I know not how many occasions. Yet our struggle continues, and we need you now no less than before. Please continue to stand with us, and together we shall safeguard the future of the realm, of this very star. And you get your Fantasia for free, and your mount, which is the Magitech armor that you wrote out, Magitech armor that you wrote out on Maggie. And that's it. Now you get flying. That wasn't originally there. You can now fly with while mounted in Lenosha, Thanland, Blackshroud, Korth, Central Highlands, and Mordona. To take flight, simply jump while mounted. And that was it. Like, you did that, and that was the end, quote unquote, of A Realm Reborn. So we finished A Realm Reborn. Obviously, the next part of the story begins right here with Nymphilia, but we're gonna take a break. I'm gonna go do some other things, some other story quest stuff, and eventually we're gonna do Bahamut as well, because I think that's an important part of the story. and I want you guys to see the story of the game. So we'll come back to Minfilia and her quest later, but we're gonna go do some other things now. But I hope you guys enjoyed actually getting to see a Realm Reborn from the perspective of somebody that played it at launch and is playing it again now, years later, and seeing how it's different. So I always thought that was enjoyable. But we'll continue on the next episode. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to jump into something. We'll see what happens.